Hello everyone, welcome to Easy Economics. How are you all doing? I hope you all are doing good. Today I brought for you all 9708 variant 44. We'll be looking at May June 2025 section B. We'll be seeing how to nail our section B responses. So the question I have chosen today is, with the help of a diagram, you need to consider whether economic efficiency can be achieved without government intervention in a market economy. Now, as we all are familiar, that the essay questions in section B of our paper 4 is of 20 marks. Now, before proceeding towards looking at the skeleton or the structure of the question, one thing I need to make you all aware is of how the marks are going to be awarded. 14 marks are going to be assessed in your answer when the examiner is going to look how well you have answered or met assessment objective 1 and 2. That means they look at your knowledge, understanding, and analysis. 14 marks. The remaining 6 marks of this question is going to be for your evaluation. So you need to have a solid understanding, analysis, and evaluation for your answers in order to score max. Now, there are certain key terms in this question which I have already underlined. The first term is consider. Now, that's the command word. Second term is economic efficiency. The last word is government intervention. Now, they want you to give a response together with a diagram. What students do is that they are either unable to produce the relevant diagram or whatever the diagram they draw is incorrect. So the examiners in the ER, they gave the feedback that the students who were unable to produce a sound diagram were unable to go beyond getting a level 2 marks. That means the maximum marks they could get was 8 out of 14 as far as assessment objective 1 and 2 was concerned. So, whenever you are asked by the examiner to produce a diagram, they are actually assessing how well you have understood or deduced the relationship between the variables they are discussing in the question. All right. Now, looking at the question. The question says consider whether economic efficiency can be achieved without government intervention in a market economy. Now, we know market economy is an economy in which the forces of demand and supply play a vital role. But if we leave everything on the market forces, we all are aware of the fact that there are certain things which the market economy fails to provide. And as a result, what happens? There exists market failure. So, in order to combat the situation of market failure, government intervention is necessary. So, now they are asking to what extent would government intervention be effective, right? So, consider means that first you will talk about a situation in which you'll say that yes, if you are leaving markets on their own, there can be a possibility of economic efficiency. However, there could also be a situation where economic inefficiency also might exist, right? So when economic efficiency would be existing, you will tell the reasons why markets fail. Then you will talk about why government intervention is necessary, but then you'll also talk about the pitfalls or the limitations or the shortcomings of the government as well. And finally, you will conclude it with a strong conclusion, right? Now, when we are talking about efficiency, we are talking about allocative and productive efficiency both. Now, first, let's look at how to structure your response. First, we'll talk about what is market economy. So, briefly, you can say market economy is an economic system in which resources are allocated through the forces of demand and supply. with little or no government intervention. Economic efficiency is when the scarce resources are used in the most efficient way in order to maximize output. Economic efficiency comprises of two things: allocative efficiency and productive efficiency. When we are talking about productive efficiency means when firms are able to produce their output at the lowest possible average cost. And here, what you'll do, you'll draw this diagram. Which diagram? This diagram, right? You'll show that the firm is able to produce at the cost curve where there is minimum cost. Plus, you can also draw a PPC diagram in order to show that the firm is utilizing its resources fully, right? There's no underutilization of resources. Further, when we are going to be talking about allocative efficiency, and yes, productive efficiency is achieved when it is at the minimum average cost, right? When we are talking about allocative efficiency is achieved when firms produce that combination of goods and services which is demanded by the consumers. That means that the firms would be producing at a point where price is equal to marginal cost. So for this situation, this is the diagram that the examiner expects you to, because we are talking about a situation of perfect competition, right? We are talking about a situation where there are lots of firms and they are almost producing similar type of products, but they are competing on price, and whichever firm is able to provide those goods and services which the consumers want at the lowest possible cost is able to survive. The others are going to be wiped off. So this is a situation of allocative efficiency where price is equals to marginal cost. And notice this is the situation, right? Now what's happening? So you're going to be talking about a situation of perfect competition. You're going to be saying that a competitive market can lead to allocative efficiency. Why? Because they are restricted to produce only those goods and services which are demanded by the consumers. Productive efficiency would also be achieved. How? When firms are able to going to maximize their profit, plus if they fail to provide at the lowest possible cost, they are going to be wiped away because they are not able to, they won't be able to survive the competition from the firms, right? But then, perfect competition is a rare situation, right? There hardly is in reality that a perfect competition exists. Why? Because there exists a situation where the market fails. And when does the market fails? When there exists negative externalities. When firms are producing their goods and services and when there is pollution. So what happens? This is a situation where the marginal social cost of providing those goods and services actually is greater than the marginal private cost. That means the society has to bear the cost in the form of negative externalities. That means that the firms are producing the output which is more than the socially efficient level of output, right? So either there would be overproduction or there would be overconsumption, leading to deadweight welfare loss. So that means, in short, there would be allocative inefficiency. As a result, it would be important for the government to intervene in order to restrict these negative externalities. And what the government can do is either the government can impose penalties or provide pollution permits. That means it would allow a certain level of pollution to be acceptable, and beyond that, it won't be. And it can further impose taxes in order to combat inefficiency or in order to restore efficiency. Then it's also been seen that markets fail to provide sizable or sufficient public goods, right? We know public goods are goods which have the features of non rivalry and non excludability. And why private firms or market economy fail to provide public goods is because it has a problem of free rider issue, right? So, for instance, if we are talking about street lighting, so firms in the private sector won't be encouraged to provide sufficient public goods. As a result, the government has to intervene in order to ensure that public goods are provided and are accessible for the general public. Plus, it has also been seen that imperfect competition could also be prevalent, right? When the consumers have lack of information or they have inaccurate information. So what happens is it leads to underconsumption of merit goods. That means the firms aren't providing sizable merit goods, right? For instance, what? For instance, health and education, right? Or it could be that either it's leading towards overconsumption of demerit goods. That means the government is going to then intervene through either doing sizable information campaigns, or either it could be providing labeling of information in order to make the public aware of the hazards of over consuming demerit goods, or it could be even combating it issues through behavioral, right? The nuts theory. Remember, it could also be implemented by the government. Further, monopoly power is also one of the drawbacks. When you see when large firms dominate the market, and what they do is they, in order to earn supernormal profit, they restrict output and they charge high prices. So they distort the market, right? As a result, what happens? Allocative inefficiency seeps in the market. That means that price is greater than marginal cost. So then this is the situation when government intervention becomes necessary, and the government use regulations and price controls, right? It could either impose maybe maximum prices, right? Or it could lead towards nationalization or privatization, depending upon the situation, right? And it could also combat the situation by providing in improved competition policies. Factor immobility is also one of the drawbacks of markets system, right? When workers may lack the required skills, right? So maybe they don't have the education or the skills necessary, so that is leading towards their occupational immobility. And it could also be hampering their geographical mobility if there are certain factors like lack of housing, right? Or maybe transportation expenses. So this is causing an increase in unemployment and would be leading towards underutilization of your resources. So the government intervention would then become vital, and the government would then provide either training and skills, increasing their supply side policy, right, in order to increase productive efficiency. Then there could also be unequal distribution of income, or it could be leading towards high income inequality, and there might exist a disparity of income between high income groups and low income groups, right? So when inequality would increase, there would be a great difference between incomes between higher income groups and lower income groups, and government intervention would be then vital or necessary to reduce it. How? The government can provide in benefits or could charge progressive system of taxation in order to minimize the gap between the rich and the poor, to reduce the poverty level or to reduce the inequality prevalent in the economy. However, the extent of government intervention is also a question that needs to be addressed. It might be that either, although the government is intervening, but how effective government policies would be depend upon the amount of corruption or the political influence the government might be under. If it's in under influence of a certain political party, it might not be able to fully implement the policies or reap the true benefits, right? So the efficiency might drop instead of increasing. It also becomes a big question mark when there are opportunity costs of these, reducing the government taking sizable actions in order to reduce the market failure, because the government might have scarce resources and it might not be interested in catering to these market failure. It might want to improve healthcare. Maybe that's a priority of the government, or maybe spending on infrastructure or defense, right? So then addressing market failure might not be a priority for the government. Plus, it also depends upon how sound or accurate information the government has regarding the costs and the benefits, right? So maybe it does not have correct information regarding the cost or the average cost or the marginal cost, right? So it might be that the decisions it might take then would have a big credibility issue, right? The availability of information it has, plus the power of enforcement, plus how big the market failure was, and were the actions or the decisions or the level at which the government decided to intervene, was it sufficient enough to cater or address the situation fully? Was it successfully implemented? And would it yield the results that the government intends to achieve? Right? So then you'll end with a conclusion. And what should the conclusion be? That the conclusion will be that yes, in theory, a perfectly competitive market can achieve both allocative and productive efficiency without government intervention, because firms would be producing at a situation where price is equals to marginal cost. But these situations rarely exist, right? And market failures would exist, and government would then have to intervene through its carefully designed intervention in order to improve efficiency. But intervention might not always be successful because governments would face these problems. So, whether efficiency can be achieved without government intervention would be dependent upon how closely the markets would resemble the assumptions of perfect competition, and how effectively would the governments address market failures. I hope you understood and enjoyed solving this question with me. Subscribe, stay tuned. I'll be back with more such informative tutorials for you. Happy learning.